He had been on bail in 2 counties and a suspended sentence at the time he killed.
The state reviews hundreds of allegations of Garda misconduct and cases not properly investigated. But victims' families say they're being let down again.
I read it about 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. Couldn't believe it. I find that they've stalled me for the last year and a half.
Hello and welcome to the programme. For more than a year now, a panel of barristers has been examining hundreds of allegations of Garda misconduct, cover-ups or serious crimes not being properly investigated. Called the Independent Review Mechanism, it was set up after a series of controversies involving An Garda Síochána and was to recommend which, if any, of the cases deserved further investigation. But many of those making the allegations now say they've lost faith in the review. Tonight, we examine the issues and speak to some of the families about their individual stories and how they feel let down by the process. Primetime's Katie Hannon has this report, which contains images some viewers may find distressing.
You don't expect all the times for criminals to adhere to court orders and court undertakings, but you do expect An Garda Síochána.
The allegations involved are more serious than what occurred in Donegal, which was the subject of the Morris Tribunal. I think this is very alarming.
The stories you are about to see are harrowing. The agony of families whose loved ones were taken from them in tragic and violent circumstances remains raw, years, even decades after their loss. Their trauma compounded by the way they say their deaths were handled by those they turn to for answers and justice. Tonight, Primetime reveals why these victims believe they have been let down by the state yet again.
There are people in this gallery whose lives have been absolutely destroyed by their interaction with An Garda Síochána.
Just 5 years after the last of the Morris Tribunal reports had exposed shocking malpractice by some Gardaí in Donegal, there appeared to be little appetite for allegations that the state was still turning a blind eye to serious Garda misconduct.
I would just like to say that I have absolute confidence in our Garda force.
But the penalty point scandal would not go away. Then, efforts by Sergeant Maurice McCabe to have cases of alleged Garda malpractice investigated exploded into the public domain.
Now, yesterday I handed a series of shocking cases to the Taoiseach involving assault, sexual assault, and a whole range of very, very profound and serious and shocking incidents.
The Guerin report would ultimately recommend that the McCabe allegations should be investigated by a commission of investigation, which is currently underway. Meanwhile, the Justice for All group, set up by a number of independent TDs, had been assembling stories of alleged Garda mishandling of serious crime and cover-ups for 18 months. Now they and other TDs were inundated with new allegations.
We got a lot of correspondence, so much so that we said all these people couldn't be crazy. They're presenting very sound and, I suppose, cohesive evidence to say that an injustice was done to them.
About 200 cases came through ourselves and the TDs that are working alongside the committee.
The government moved quickly to put in place what it termed an independent review mechanism. 7 barristers would review all the alleged cases and would recommend what further action, if any, were necessary. To many families' dismay, it would be a paper review only, and it would take 8 to 12 weeks. That deadline would prove to be ambitious. 4 months later, the Minister was carefully managing expectations.
I think it's important to be realistic and to acknowledge that in some cases, perhaps a majority of cases, there may be a decision that no further action is recommended.
320 cases were ultimately accepted for review. 17 months later, 152 families have received a response to their complaints. The Justice Department would not confirm what was in those responses, saying the Minister will issue a comprehensive statement when the process is complete. However, we know that of the first 120 cases reviewed, the panel recommended that no further action was warranted in 105 cases. Just 9 cases were referred to GSOC for investigation, while the Minister sought a report from the Garda Commissioner in 6 other cases.
It is a very limited number that further action is being recommended on, and I must say I was never overly optimistic in that regard. From the outset, this was a body with limited powers.
Most of the cases reviewed were allegations of Garda misconduct. Others were complaints about the DPP or other aspects of the justice system. The most serious cases involved the loss of life. We looked at 6 such cases. Patrick Nugent died February 1984, aged 23. Adrian Moynihan died March 2001, aged 23. Shane Toohey died February 2002, aged 23. Catherine Davis died June 2007, aged 35. John Kelly died October 2008, aged 24. Shane O'Farrell died August 2011, aged 23.
Adrian was a very lovable guy. Everyone had good time for Adrian. He was a real happy-go-lucky guy. He'd half his heart with you. He was on his own journey for a few years prior to this, and he fell into the wrong side of the law on a few occasions. But he was getting his life back together.
On Mother's Day in 2001, Adrian Moynihan went out on the town with a friend. This CCTV footage shows Adrian and his friend Dara at the entrance of Sidetracks nightclub in Cork city centre at just after midnight. Dara had been refused entry. They spent several minutes trying to plead their case to no avail. After an exchange of words with one of the doormen, Adrian suddenly struck him. Then this happened. The Gardaí were called 9 minutes later and arrived within a few minutes, but the family has issues with their initial response. They say the CCTV footage and medical evidence cast doubt on the Garda statements about the length of time Adrian was handcuffed and when he was put into the recovery position. Ambulance crews who arrived 14 minutes after the Gardaí could detect no signs of life. Adrian was pronounced dead in hospital at 1:07 a.m. The Moynahans also question why the doormen were only arrested and formally questioned 6 days after Adrian's death.
We had lots of questions, which we got no answers. And all we were told was, look, please, leave us do our job. And we knew no more until I came in from work one evening and Mum was there crying. A guard had called to her whilst she was on her own and said the DPP are doing nothing about this.
The state pathologist Mary Cassidy originally found that Adrian's death was due to asphyxia. However, having viewed the CCTV footage and read the doorman's statements for a second inquest, she amended the cause of death to restraint asphyxia due to neck compression, fixing of chest and pinning of arms behind his back. The case was reopened, but again the DPP ruled out a prosecution. After years of campaigning, the Moynahans were given hope again that the independent review panel would be a new avenue to secure a fresh look at the case. But last week, the family received the official response to their complaint. Council does not recommend further action by the Minister. It is not possible that either an inquiry or any other form of ministerial direction can be employed to cause the DPP to revise her independently arrived at and statutorily independent decision.
I read it about 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. Couldn't believe it. I thought there was something in it, cryptic, that I was meant to read and say, listen, have a look at it this way. But no, I can't see it now. There's nothing there. I find that they've stalled me for the last year and a half.
On the 10th of February last year, a function took place here in Bunratty Folk Park. It was a party to celebrate the 40th wedding anniversary of Shannon Airport's executive chef, William Ryan, and his wife, Chrissy. Around 60 guests attended that night, but the celebration ended in tragedy. In the early hours of the morning, a puzzling incident took place, which resulted in the death of the 23-year-old banqueting manager on duty that night, Patrick Nugent.
A guard called to Patrick Nugent's home the following morning and told his parents their son had suffered a heart attack and died.
I said, somebody must have hit him. And the guard said, no, nobody hit him. There's no marks on him.
Later, they were told by Gardaí that a car had run over his body. And later again, that Patrick had been crushed against a wall.
It is very sad now. My wife has gone to a hospital with the shock of it. And my family is broke up.
They went to their graves not knowing how or why Patrick met his death. In October 1985, the inquest jury heard there were conflicting accounts from two off-duty Gardaí who were guests at the party.
And there are three clear factors emerging from this book of evidence. Firstly, a high consistency in the statements given by the staff on duty that night. A high degree of inconsistency and disagreement in some of the statements of key witnesses, including the two Gardaí present that night. And above all, the memos and statements of the investigating Gardaí clearly show that at least in the early days of their inquiry, they were not given full cooperation.
The jury found that Patrick Nugent was struck by a person or persons unknown, which resulted in his falling to the ground and being accidentally hit by a car. The jury attached a rider to its verdict because of the suppression of evidence by witnesses to the event, calling on the Minister for Justice to have the matter further investigated. Successive Ministers for Justice have not ordered this inquiry. Having exhausted all other avenues in their search for answers, Patrick's siblings submitted the case to the Independent Review Panel last year. They are still awaiting a response.
Catherine was a lovable person. She was great fun, very witty. And everyone that knew Catherine knew she did have an alcohol problem, but overriding all that, Catherine was a very decent person, very gentle person. Eventually her marriage broke down because of it, and she also lost access to her children. It had gotten very bad, and Catherine had become very depressed herself. And all avenues had been exhausted at this stage. So we decided that we needed to take charge and take Catherine to hospital ourselves.
Catherine was admitted to South Tipperary General Hospital in Clonmel to treat her alcoholism. It was mid-June 2007. On a visit a few days after she was admitted, Susan became concerned at how unwell Catherine appeared to be. She returned to the hospital that evening with her father. When they arrived, they were told that Catherine had just discharged herself.
There was immediate concern because we knew Catherine had no clothes, we knew she had no phone, and we knew she had no money. So we said to the nurse, where is she? You know, who did she leave with? So they said she left with a man.
Shocked that Catherine had left hospital in her nightie with a man she barely knew, they were eventually given his name and told he lived locally. Once back at home, they decided to contact a Garda friend who rang Clonmel Garda station.
He got back to my brother and he said, the Gardaí in Clonmel do know him, but they don't know his address because they said he doesn't have an address, he moves around. But they assured us they would do everything they could to find her and they would keep an eye out for her.
But the next contact they had from the Gardaí was to relay shocking news.
Less than 48 hours later, we got the news that she was found dead in this man's apartment, or house, sorry. My dad rang and said, come up and come straight away to the house. And when I got up, he was standing at the gate waiting for me and he just said, she's gone. And I just walked away from him, ran into my house and just fell to my knees. I couldn't believe it. You see that in here?
Toxicology results would eventually confirm that Catherine died of alcohol poisoning combined with the benzodiazepines she had been prescribed in the hospital. A few months after Catherine died, Susan contacted a solicitor to represent the family at the inquest. She explained to him that the Gardaí hadn't been able to tell them where this man lived.
He just looked at me and said, they know his address perfectly well. I was shocked and I actually didn't believe it, but it just played and played on my mind.
Susan approached the hospital and discovered that Catherine had also discharged herself in the company of this man the previous evening.
And following that discharge, she arrived into hospital unconscious the following morning.
And that wasn't all.
I discovered he was in hospital because he had been arrested earlier by Clonmel Gardaí. There was some incident, and during that incident he received an injury. So after arresting him, they also took him to hospital where he met my sister.
There has never been any suggestion that this man had anything to do with Catherine's death. Over the following weeks, Susan says that a Garda officer agreed to take a statement from Catherine's doctor on 4 separate occasions, but the doctor was never asked for the statement. She was disappointed, but arranged to come to the station to give her own statement. In the course of giving it, she said that Clonmel Gardaí had told them they didn't have an address for the man who left the hospital with Catherine.
There was an awkward silence between us. And then I said to him, "Is there something wrong?" And he said, "I can't write that either." And I said, "Will you tell me why you can't write it? Will you either write it down or tell me why you can't write it?" And he said, "Because everyone here knows his address and I can't write down that we told you we didn't." So then I just sat back in my chair and I said to him, "You mean to tell me you all knew his address here that night and none of you bothered to help us?" So then I told him I wasn't happy with the investigation at all.
Susan returned to the station a few days later and met a more senior officer. He was extremely supportive. But when she returned a week later as requested, she was directed to a room to see another senior Garda.
The things he said to me that day and the way he spoke to me, I was told to come in, you tell me who took the call. And he said, "We don't have to tell you that." And then I said to him, "I was also told by the sergeant you'd have a statement from the doctor. Did you get that first?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Are you going to get it?" And he said, "That'll be my decision, not yours." He also called Catherine withered looking. He said to me, "If you're looking for anyone to blame Catherine. This is her fault." He said, "Not ours." And I walked down the stairs and I remember I was just shaking. I couldn't believe, I won't even say I was angry. I don't know what I was feeling. I think I was shocked and stunned I'd been spoken to in that manner. I couldn't believe it. I had no more contact in with the Gardaí after that.
This Garda officer has denied speaking to Susan in this manner. Susan complained to GSOC. It concluded that no Gardaí would be disciplined. She asked for a review.
I just couldn't believe what was on it. The senior officer denied speaking to me the way he did, and because I had no evidence that he did speak to me in that manner, he wasn't disciplined over it. And the thing that really shocked me was that they told me that the Garda on duty the night the call was made could not remember the call coming in to the station. And no Garda was disciplined.
Susan is still waiting for the outcome of her complaint to the independent review panel, but she is not hopeful.
I now know that we weren't spoken to, we weren't asked for any information, and no files have been requested in Catherine's case. So to me, that's not a full and complete review. How can it be? So for that reason, I will not accept a negative result in this.
John Kelly was just 24 when he drowned in this isolated spot in the Dublin Docklands at about 1 a.m. on October 16th, 2008.
Everyone called him Mr. Soft. He was a lovely boy, you know. He really didn't deserve to die the way he died.
It's not clear why John ended up here that night. What is known is that after he entered the water, several residents in the apartment block on the opposite quay called the Gardaí. John's family have concerns about the response. The first call to the Gardaí was logged at 12:28 a.m. The Fire Brigade Swift Water Rescue Team wasn't alerted until 3 minutes to 1. The Gardaí at the scene did throw John a rope, but he didn't catch it, and he went under the water for the last time just before the water rescue team arrived.
There were several calls, or people out on the balconies, and they were saying to him, hey, hold on, you know, the Garda are coming, the Garda are coming. But the Garda arrived without actually ringing rescue services. They were told that there was somebody in the water, but yet services were not rang until a half an hour after one of the calls were made. So it really wasn't adequate.
The family was also deeply concerned about the reluctance of the Gardaí to treat it as a criminal matter.
We'd asked about his belongings, so he'd bought runnings that day, you know, his phone, money, bracelet, where was his belongings, and they said that they didn't know where his belongings were. So at that stage we had said, well, you know, they're investigating his death. And they basically said, no, there's nothing to suspect, anything suspicious, so we won't be investigating. So that was from the word go.
John had been treated for a drink problem, but his family will never believe he took his own life. They point out that he was in a strange location. His belongings were missing, there were marks on his neck and evidence of a head trauma, and the coroner's office told them they had to destroy his clothes as they were badly soiled with blood. They complained to GSOC, but, like over 40% of cases taken on by the Garda Ombudsman, their case was referred back to the Gardaí for an unsupervised investigation. They lost faith in that process. Then the family pinned their hopes on the independent review panel.
We thought, you know, this is it, we've got a chance. There's a difference being made. We put John's case in with the independent review a year ago. We've emailed the Minister for Justice on several occasions. We keep getting the same thing back, saying, you know, it's ongoing, it's ongoing. We want a full investigation into John's death and for this to be taken seriously. It's not good enough.
This is Zygamantis Grzycka, a heroin addict living in Carrickmacross, County Monaghan. In the months leading up to the summer of 2011, he was twice released on bail by two separate courts and received a suspended sentence from a third. On August 2nd, 2011, his car was stopped by the drug squad and the car was searched. No drugs were found. It would later emerge that the car was not roadworthy and the driver was not insured. Grzycka got behind the wheel after the search and drove off. About an hour later, Shane O'Farrell was cycling home after a training session for a triathlon. The 23-year-old had handed in his dissertation for a Master's in Law from Trinity College earlier that day.
He was always smiling, he played the guitar. He was just very comfortable in his own skin. Very lovely to know.
Here at Tullavara Upper, Grzycka struck Shane O'Farrell from behind. He carried the young cyclist on the bonnet, windscreen and roof of his car for some distance. Grzycka did not touch the brakes. He drove on, abandoned the car a few miles away, went home and told his wife, "I knocked someone down, but I don't know who." They both went to bed without calling the emergency services. Shane's devastated family believe that if Gardaí had done their jobs properly, this man would not have been at liberty to kill him.
He had been on bail in 2 counties and a suspended sentence at the time he killed. He was waved on an hour earlier by the drug squad with 3 known Lithuanians in the car, uninsured and no NCT, and the driver were uninsured. And this car should have been seized.
He pleaded guilty to failing to remain at the scene of an accident and failing to call the emergency services. He pleaded not guilty to the most serious charge of dangerous driving causing death. In court, the judge threw out this charge, citing insufficient evidence. Before sentencing, the judge asked where his son lived. He was told he lived in Lithuania. He offered him a choice of serving an 8-month sentence or returning to Lithuania.
He said, "Would you like to join him and would you like a few minutes to think about it?" So my husband and I and my girl sat there while the man who took our child's life in the most cruel and inhumane manner had a choice about what to do with his life.
He chose to go home. He was given 21 days to get his affairs in order. Grzycka had not been charged with driving without insurance within the required 6 months. However, Lucia was assured by a Garda officer that he would be charged with several counts of obtaining motor insurance fraudulently. She was told this was a very serious matter which could carry a heavy penalty. However, this file was not sent to the DPP until the day after the court case relating to the hit and run was concluded, and despite the judge asking if there was anything pending for the accused before sentencing, there was no mention of it during the court proceedings.
Now, it's very alarming that there was a file on 8 years of insurance fraud that was very relevant to the court into my son's death, and yet it was delayed and delivered to the DPP office the day after the court was over. So the court finished on the 28th of February and the file was delivered on the 1st of March.
6 days after their case, Grzycka was before the district court on another matter. The O'Farrells were shocked to learn from a Garda officer in court that the insurance fraud would be dealt with on that day too.
I said, no, you can't do that. You promised our family this was an indictable offence in front of a judge and jury. He would get up to 5 years. He can only get 6 months in a district court. You can't do that. He said, well, that's the way it is now. And I said, shame on you.
He was convicted of 3 counts of insurance fraud.
He served the 5 months with a quarter off for good behaviour. On the 27th of June, he was escorted by 2 members of the Garda National Immigration Bureau home, back to Lithuania.
Following a sustained campaign by the family, former Minister Alan Shatter ordered GSOC to review the case last year. It also became one of the cases accepted for review by the independent review mechanism. However, the family was shocked to learn that one of the 2 senior counsels appointed to the panel had represented the man who had killed Shane. Justice Minister Francis Fitzgerald has defended the appointment, stating that steps had been taken to ensure that this senior counsel would have no involvement with this file.
I strongly object to him being on it. There's a blatant conflict of interest and perception of bias. By her saying there's sufficient counsel on the panel, there aren't. There are 2 seniors, so that if there are 319 cases, 318 of them have the benefit of 2 senior counsels, and my son has only 1. And that removes the safety net for Shane. So no, that isn't sufficient.
The O'Farrells also share other complainants' concerns about what exactly the panel would be reviewing.
Maybe if other families had sent in a file, that was the file that was being looked at. In our case, because our complaints had gone in for over a year prior to the review panel being set up, we didn't know what was being viewed or from who.
The question of what was available to the panel for review in these cases has dogged this process from the outset. Justice Minister Francis Fitzgerald told the Dáil the review panel had access to information from the Gardaí and GSOC.
Information was also requested through my department at the request of the panel from the Garda Síochána and the Garda Síochána Ombudsman Commission in approximately 80 cases.
So some families wrote to GSOC asking if they had made their file available to the independent review panel. GSOC responded that it had not, as the independent review mechanism is a non-statutory mechanism, and as such it is not entitled to request or receive from GSOC files and documentation relating to complaints made to GSOC. So the GSOC files were off limits to the review panel. So we asked the Department of Justice if the panel had the authority to access the Garda files. The department responded somewhat cryptically. The Gardaí fully cooperated with requests for information in connection with the cases referred to the panel. So we asked again, repeatedly, did the panel have access to Garda files, yes or no? A spokesman for the Minister declined to say. When pressed, he would only repeat the Gardaí fully cooperated with requests for information. The Minister also told the Dáil that the panel had requested additional information from many families.
They have the facility to request my department to seek further information from the complainant or from other bodies which they believe may hold information which is relevant to their considerations. Further information was provided by complainants, can I say to you, in over 200 cases.
However, the Justice for All group says it's not aware of any complainants being asked to provide further information.
We know from the hundreds of cases that have come through our offices, nobody there was contacted by this panel. Nobody was asked to clarify anything, to submit any further information.
Indeed, when one family attempted to do so, it was rebuffed. Shane Toohey disappeared after leaving a disco in Clara, County Offaly in February 2002. A week later, his brother pulled his body out of the River Brosna. The Gardaí treated the death as suicide. His family suspected foul play. In the intervening years, they have compiled what they believe is significant evidence to challenge the suicide theory and support claims that Shane was assaulted on the night he died. The Gardaí admitted to failings in the original investigation, but have insisted following a second investigation that there is no evidence to indicate foul play. Having submitted their complaint to the review panel, the family discovered that CCTV tapes they had been told were missing had turned up. They had hoped this was important new evidence they could present to the independent review panel, but not so.
We are certainly aware of one particular case where further information has come forward, and the family got in touch with the Department of Justice and they said they could not include this further information.
The Toohey family was told the review panel could not view the tapes as the examination of any evidence in the context of a criminal investigation is an operational matter for the Garda Commissioner. When Sean Guerin was asked to review the McCabe allegations, he interviewed Sergeant McCabe for 19 hours and spent many more hours combing through the original Garda investigations. By comparison, this independent review mechanism appears to be a very limited process. They didn't hear any oral evidence. They didn't have the authority to access the GSOC files. It appears they couldn't access the Garda files, and they weren't in a position to review fresh evidence. The Justice Department is at pains to point out that the review panel was simply asked to triage the allegations to see if any further investigations were needed. But the question remains, what doctor would be comfortable recommending surgery without seeing the patient's file? Many of the families we spoke to are now actively searching for legal representation outside this state. There is even talk of a class action to the European Court of Human Rights.
Well, a lot of the people now, the complainants that have submitted their cases, are disillusioned. So they've decided to take their cases out of the jurisdiction and employ a legal team from out of the jurisdiction to get justice. I really think that says an awful lot about our justice system.
The scale of the misconduct that is occurring, it requires us to acknowledge that it's not traitorous to say that there is misconduct occurring. We simply want to improve that situation. These people have rights that need to be respected, and there will be further legal avenues for those people if it's found that this system didn't comply with those obligations.
Katie Hannon reporting. We did request an interview on this issue with Justice Minister Frances Fitzgerald, but she wasn't available. Now, a word about our budget programme next Tuesday night. If you'd like to be part of our live studio audience, you can ring Dublin 208 3040 or email primetime@rte.ie. But that's it for tonight. Our next news bulletin is on RTE News now at 11 o'clock. For now, though, from everyone on the team, thanks for watching and good night.
Coming up next tonight, in a change to our schedule, some of the brightest stars of Irish theatre remember one of their own, the late great playwright Brian Friel. And drama series Ordinary Lives returns next Tuesday night at 10:15.